I'm here in London with right-wing Dutch politician Geert Wilders, who's here to show a film that he's made called Fitna in the House of Lords at the invitation of the UK Independence Party. Geert Wilders, thanks very much for talking to RT today. Now, first, could you tell me what your film is about?
Yes, Fitna, I was very happy to show it in the House of Lords finally today. Is about the Koran, and what I did is that I used certain verses from certain surahs, and I used no actors but real-time footage to show that what is written in the Koran is unfortunately also the reality all over the world, whether it's 9/11 or the streets of Amsterdam or attacks in Madrid or London. So I showed what is written in the Koran. That is not an old book from centuries ago, but is still unfortunately inspiring people to do the most terrible things and acts of terrorism all over the world.
In your film, you compare the Quran with Mein Kampf. Why did you feel the need to do that?
Yes, in my speech for the House of Lords today, I quoted Winston Churchill, who also, in a book for which he got the Nobel Prize of Literature, made this comparison in the 50s here in the United Kingdom, and I said that I believe that Winston Churchill was spot on. I believe that the Islam is not so much a religion, but more an ideology. It wants to rule and dominate not only all aspects of one's life, but a whole society. Therefore, it should not be compared to other religions like Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism, but it should be compared with other totalitarian ideologies like communism or fascism. And I believe the symbol of fascism, Mein Kampf, can be compared with the symbol of the other totalitarian ideology, Islam, which is called the Quran. There is no room for anything else. If you are kuffar, if you are not a Muslim, if you are a Jew or a Christian, if you are a renegade or an apostate, well, you face severe punishment, if not death, according to this ideology, this totalitarian ideology called Islam. You can all read that in the Quran. This is why I made this comparison.
And you're calling for the Quran to be banned. Does that not go against the sort of European ideology of free speech?
Well, normally it would, yes, but I said it in the Dutch context, and you have to understand the Dutch context. In the Netherlands, a few decades ago, Mein Kampf was outlawed. And at that time, the leftish and the liberals politicians in Holland applauded it. Nobody stood up and said, hey, our freedom of speech, we should not ban a book. So in the Dutch parliament 2 years ago, I said to the left, well, if you are consistent, you applauded the banning of this book. I'm not in favor of banning any books normally, but if you are consistent, there is another book that is also full of incitement of violence. So if you are consistent, you should now also advocate the outlawing of the Quran. Of course they didn't. They shouted that I was an idiot, and they said, well, Mein Kampf, okay, that should be outlawed, but the Quran should not. So I tried to expose, and I think I was successful, that they were very inconsistent.
There's certainly one person who would disagree with you. Dr. Mohammed Tahir al-Qadri, who's a Muslim cleric, has issued a fatwa against terrorism through his own reading and interpretation of the Quran. Is that a move that you support?
Well, you know, there is no room for much interpretation when it comes to the Quran and the Sharia. I mean, it's written in the book, and Muslims believe it's the word of Allah. It's not to be interpreted. It's a difference, for instance, with the Old or the New Testament. And also people forget about the concept of taqiyya. Taqiyya means that Muslims who are living, it's an Islamic concept, I not invent it myself. If Muslims are living under Muslim rule, but especially under non-Muslim rule in non-Muslim countries, they can lie. I'm not saying that all Muslims are liars, that would be ridiculous, but they are allowed to fool one society and to lie about it. For instance, if a Muslim believes that homosexuality is something that should be punished, if asked that question, he would give the political correct answer and say, this is not true, or we should accept it. And I promise you that as long or as soon as the Islam becomes more prominent, it doesn't even have to be dominant, that they will change their tune. So I'm not saying that it's a bad thing what this Imam said, but believing him is something entirely different.
But do you accept that the vast majority of Muslims are as peace-loving and law-abiding as you are, and it's just a tiny percentage of them that are fundamentalists or prone towards fundamentalism?
Of course. The majority of the Muslims in our Western societies are law-abiding people like you and me. Still, I want to stop of the immigration from people from Islamic countries, because they still bring along a culture that is not ours. I mean, look at all the countries, for instance in the Middle East, where the Islam is dominant. You see no rule of law, you see no functioning parliament, you see no civil society, and you see that as long as you are not a Muslim, whether you are a journalist or a Christian or a renegade, that you face a lot of problems, if not prosecution or even death. So I believe that even though I admit that the majority of the Muslims are not terrorists, I mean the majority of the terrorists are Muslims, but not the majority of the Muslim terrorists, that we still should stop the immigration from Muslim countries. And for the Muslims that are already in our societies, I have a very clear message. Either you adopt to our values and our laws and our constitution, and then you are equal as anybody else, and we will even help you to integrate. But if you don't, if you cross the red line of violence, or wanting to implement Sharia or any other terrible thing, then we have to either put you in jail or expel you out of our countries.
And on those lines, you are in favour of administrative detention without charge or trial for terror suspects. Does that not undermine the very values that you are trying to protect?
No, there are countries like the State of Israel that uses for decades already administrative detention, both to radicals from Islamic background, but also to radical Jews like the Kahan movement.
And is deeply criticised for it, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I mean, they can be criticized, but it's there, and it has been discussed in the Australian Parliament, even though it's not implemented. It's fair that if you, and I made this remark just after the murder of Theo van Gogh in the streets of Amsterdam, who was slaughtered by an Islamic radical, Mohammed Bouyeri. And then the Secret Service in Holland said that we have a few hundred of those kind of people walking through the streets, but we don't have any proof, according to our penal code, to apprehend them. And at that time, a few years ago, I said, well, then let's use the administrative detention. It's still a decision not only of the government, but it's still being checked by a judge, another judge than in a normal penal court case. Because if I have to choose between all the rights of the potential terrorist or the right for people who, with their wife and children, go shopping or take a train in the Netherlands, I find that the latter has more right of freedom than the first.
Moving on a little bit, this week you won your first municipality in the local elections, which is always seen as a good indicator for national elections. How does that change things for you?
Well, already for a year now, we are very successful in the Dutch polls. And the last year, at the European elections, we became, together with the Christian Democrats, the biggest party in Holland. We have the most seats in the European Parliament. It was a real election. 2 days ago, we had an excellent result in 2 municipality elections. In one city, we became the first, and the second, we became the second. And even in the national poll this week, we are the most popular and the biggest party of Holland. So we have elections in Holland now in 3 months' time, and well, we have to campaign and work a lot, but I'm confident that with our agenda, that we will become one of the biggest, if not the biggest party in the Netherlands in 3 months' time.
A reaction that I read in the newspaper to your election victory was from a Muslim woman who was born in the Netherlands, and she said that she didn't used to wear the headscarf, but now she's decided that she will in protest. Are you not in danger of forcing people to become stricter Muslims than they otherwise would have become?
No, I'm not afraid of that. Perhaps some of them will, and out of protest will wear a headscarf, for instance. But that is not so much of my concern. My concern is to preserve the freedom and the own identity of the Netherlands. And this is so important. Once again, we are not, Europe is not an Islamic continent. Holland is not an Islamic country. And we have to say at some moment, enough is enough. The people in the Netherlands are saying enough is enough. And because we have to implement everything in a fully democratical way. But some protest that always will be there if you, after decades of appeasing, finally put forward some strong measures, are inevitable. But there can be no reason not to implement what you feel should be implemented.
Your visit to London's caused quite a stir. What did you hope to achieve here, and do you think it's been worth it?
Yes, it was worth it. I was sent back after being detained for a few hours last year when I arrived in Heathrow. I went to a court in the United Kingdom. The court agreed with me and overruled the decision of then Minister Jackie Smith here in the United Kingdom, so I was allowed to come. So it's not so much a victory for me, it's a victory for freedom of speech. here, and I also made some remarks showing fitna about the threat of the Islamization. So both on the fields of the freedom of speech as the threat of Islam, I certainly made my point, and the people who are demonstrating in favor or against me are using their freedom of speech. And this is part of democracy, so I applaud that.
Geert Wilders, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.